Before we start, I just want to read off a few things about today's guest so you understand why I reached out to her on LinkedIn. Division One field hockey at Harvard, PhD, lived in a remote village. And please, if I miss something, you can tell me at the end. Working with a VC-backed startup that raised over $1 million, leading a nonprofit of 500 plus people across 3 countries, fluent dish in 5 languages, and is working on publishing a book and directing a film. Also helps coach smart people unlock their potential. Did I miss anything?
That's life. I guess that's it.
I wanted to get, as I stumble through that, it's been a long day. I apologize, everyone. I wanted to get into something that's top of my mind is learning a language, which I think most people always want to do that. And most people never take the time or don't stay focused enough to actually get to a level where they actually can have a conversation or be fluent. What's your success or cheat codes to make that happen?
Immersion, for sure. So, and then this started like from such a young age. So, in our house, my parents do not speak to me in English. We often reply in English, but mom and dad speak to us in Kutchi, which is a dialect of Gujarati, which is one of India's many, many languages. So that was theirs from the time that I was born, right? Exposed to 2 languages from very, very early on. And then when I was a toddler, mom had the great idea of hiring a nanny who was French and who spoke French. And so since we were very, very little, the idea, mom's like very forward thinking idea as a first generation immigrant who herself had migrated to Canada from East Africa, like as a teenager, or as late, in her 18, 19 years old, had the foresight to just expose us to languages from such a young age, which meant that like I think the ability to pick up a language was kind of ingrained. And then as we went through school, it was like, okay, well, I already know French, so let's just take Spanish. And then our school sent us to like, we got to go, and the incentive, of course, was if you took French or Spanish, you got to go and travel as a sort of school trip for 2 weeks to Mexico City or to Montpellier. And so we got these immersion experiences. I tried learning at Harvard. I took 2 more languages. So I took Hindi and Urdu for one year and learned how to write in both scripts. Will not claim fluency in either of those languages, but have basic working abilities and like the ability to read the scripts. And then took Farsi for a year. At the end of which I knew nothing because our professor was like one of the most famous Persian translators in the world and refused to speak in the language in class. And so then I moved to Tajikistan and was like, okay, I know how to conjugate every single verb. And I do not understand a word anyone is saying. But I think because I understood the constructions and everything, it took me about a month to be conversational, embedded in a village where no one spoke a word of English.
That's amazing. I had the complete opposite upbringing. I grew up in a very Republican way of thinking about they need to learn our language and
Hegemony of English.
we're not learning Spanish, which is crazy now in 2026 to think you live in California and you don't want your child to learn Spanish, but different time period.
Yeah.
There was no you should go do that because it's going to be beneficial.
Can I nerd out for a second?
Yeah.
There's something to be said for living at the margins of a society. Like, I think that, like, the marginal status of my parents, right? Like, the fact that they were new immigrants, like, initially when I was born economically disadvantaged, I think it creates this type of creativity of how to gain access to knowledge and using knowledge as, like, a tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, totally. Um, there's so many things I want to ask you, and I know we don't have endless time, but I love travel, and I would love to know about your experience living in a remote village
Mm.
and all of that.
Okay, so this was I rocked up to Tajikistan. I actually stopped in Moscow and met someone who was like, "Oh, go stay with my parents," and so I was like, "Okay, let's just go visit." And I go visit. I was accompanied by this like high school girl. She was a high school student at the time. She was so sweet. We're still in touch. She was learning English in school. So she was like, this is going to help me to practice my English. Let me come with you. And so she sort of pseudo served as translator. And I showed up at this house and the father of the family walks in and I just look at him and I'm like, oh my God, this guy looks exactly like my own father. And there was just this like vibe in the house where it was like, I just come home. And, we stayed there for just under a week at first. And by the second day, I was like peeling potatoes together with them. Like we couldn't talk per se or communicate, but there was this like unspoken bond where it kind of already felt like I was one of theirs. And they took me in like a real daughter, which meant that I got told off just like anyone else, as is expected. And so after a week, we went back to the city of Korog, where there were, which was a lot less remote. Like, I mean, there's all your major institutions there. And that was the only place where I had email or phone. So I connected with my PhD supervisors and was like, hey, I think this is the place. We go back, and my like sister, as it were, had just given birth in my 2-day absence. And she'd already named her daughter after me. And yeah, and it was this like deep integration into not just there's something about making the strange familiar, right? And finding the familiar in the strange. And I think that happened very early. And so even in that first month, as I was trying to find the language to speak and to engage and to have verbal communication, there were these underlying currents of the nonverbal that allowed us to connect, resonate, and do all of those things. Um, my parents, meanwhile, I was like, I think 24 at the time. So still like relatively young, especially for considering that we're a very, very tight migrant family, with, traditional values of, being really close to your parents and calling them every day. And my parents, there was an Afghan, we were on the Tajik Afghan border, and there was no Tajik cell phone reception from like Tajik carriers, but the Afghan cell phone reception we could receive, but we didn't have any credit to make outgoing calls. So my parents would spend like $1.50 a minute to call me every day because they were like so freaked out. And as they would call, it was fall, so it was harvest time. And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm hoeing potatoes today," and "Oh yeah, we're like taking the sheep out to pasture." And they were like, "What the hell is happening to my daughter here?" So they were like, "We got to go see this girl, make sure that she's okay." So they booked a trip by the end of that first month, and they came into, and I was like, "Guys, like, there is no running water into the house here. We are talking an outhouse. Like, there is going to be," and they were like, "We don't care. We're going to be just fine." And they like came into the village. They lived they stayed for a week. By the time they left, the phone calls had gone from like, "Why, like, are you doing this?" to "You're not helping enough. Get off the phone and go help." Right. Like, are you pulling your fair share? And yeah, so it was this kind of very beautiful connection of two extended families. And I think for all of the things that were unusual or different from our day-to-day lives, like not having toilet paper or running water to like wipe yourself, so like cutting up old magazines and like learning of the different absorption facilities of a newspaper versus a magazine and all of these kind of things, that familiarity was there. And just before I finished, there was one other layer of familiarity that I kind of wanted to just touch on, which is that I was living in a house of one of the best surgeons in the entire former Soviet Union. And my Tajik mom, who I call Gia, which is the local word for mom, was a midwife gynecologist who delivered babies from all around. The one who my sister who just given birth was, I think she was trained in a lab. Like they all had university level education at a bachelor level, if not higher. They were academically versed. Their library was the only room in the house that was separate from the sleeping and living area. And it was filled with floor to ceiling books. And when we would not have power during the day and the sun would set at like 3:30 p.m. in the middle of winter, we would sit by like our one flashlight or candlelight and debate Marx. Like this was like, it was an intellectual home. And there was no space for ego or Western privilege when I was living with a group of people who had traveled to Moscow, had experienced every luxury that I'd experienced myself, and were choosing in some ways and in other ways not choosing, but living what it meant to be to live in their homeland and to keep that sort of identity alive.
Th- so they were happy where they were. There wasn't like a plan to, we have all this education experience and we're going to go live a better life like so many people do once they get an education.
Yeah,
Wow.
correct.
That that's a very unique living situation. How long were you there for?
A year.
Oh, wow.
Mm,
Wow.
mm.
Do you ever do you look back at that like as maybe that's the way to live, like fondly, or you're like, I couldn't do that again at this age that you're at now?
Um, I think the truth is always not in the middle of the two extremes, but both the extremes simultaneously. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah.
And I think that it's like, I think for me, it's a question of what does it mean to be like in that, because what is at the core of that way of being is a type of values driven existence that like cuts through the distractions that we have in our everyday. And I don't think that you need to be like in a certain type of a situation to aim for that type of way of being in the world.
Mm.
And so I think that for me is the learning, right? Is it's this idea of how do I see God in everything, and how do I stay true to what matters to me in my life, which for them and in that context was to contribute back to a society.
Mm.
And then to do that for them in nature, which was where how and in the nature that is their homeland and the homeland of their ancestors, where they felt the ever presence of the divine. And like and that being religion
Yeah.
versus, like holing and pigeonholing religion and sticking it in a religious space per se, which is so easy for us to do, and having it be infinitely more spiritual and ever present.
Yeah. I feel like some of these people, there's so many people that are trying to live off grid or are living off grid now, and they're trying to find versions of that to be so they don't have to rely on the system or
Mhm.
an employer, and it's more affordable. But it's like so many things that it almost becomes a religion in a way, because
Exactly.
you can create the community you want the world to be like on a very mini scale. And I think that's the attraction. I've watched way too many YouTube videos of people living off the grid, but that I feel that draw, but at the same time, like I'm not handy, and I don't want to like go to a toilet where there's sawdust involved, and like I like some of modern society, but I also do I have spent time living in very sort of remote places in Australia, and there is something about where it's like there's no distractions and the people you're with is that's your world now, and you just sort of, I don't know, the days just unfold differently than when you're working like a 9 to 5 and you're at home and with your house and doing all the day to day. It's just different, and I can't really even describe it. What's one thing that Harvard taught you? I know it probably taught you a lot of things, but what's one thing it didn't teach you about life?
It didn't teach me about life. It, like, did not in the negative?
Yeah.
It's an interesting question. What did it not teach me about life? Or is a lot it did not teach me. I think it did not because I was young. I always say, like, the thing that it did teach me was how to think. Like, I
Mm.
think that was the thing that it did teach me, how to think critically, how to trust my own internal, like, the instant inner reactions so that I could form a thought out of it. What it perhaps did not teach me. Okay, so I think there are potentially, I think they're the same answer. So, like, I think, and this is not a Harvard, maybe it's a Harvard, well, so part of it was what I learned in my PhD that I did not get out of my undergrad. My PhD was in Manchester. I worked in a socialist department, and all of the professors were Marxists in some way or another.
Hmm.
And the thing that I had to unlearn from my Harvard experience, and so this is my way of trying to answer your question, is humility.
Mm.
So intellectual humility, practical humility, how do you like downplay, and it was also like the UK where it's like, cup half empty, right? So like how do you like, I mean, I think the thing that you're trained and everyone talks about this is like how do you drop the H bomb as soon as possible in a conversation to gain legitimacy or authority. And I think like that was what the thing that it did not teach me is that that's not what matters in life.
Mm.
That there are other values aside from being comparatively the best. I'm not using the word excellence because I think excellence has space even that and goes hand in hand with humility. But being comparatively excellent is something that I think it fosters proactively, uh, by nature of the fact that you had to be comparatively excellent to get in the first place, right? Uh,
Right.
and I think that it's that type of thing, like just the privilege of it.
Mm.
And I think that like undoing the ego that can come with privilege was a big part of the years that came thereafter. And living in a post-Soviet context really helped with that as well.
Mm.
And where values are like in Tajikistan of the communal first, not individual progress, right? What is
Yeah.
community as a whole? And my PhD was actually quite explicitly on how do you moralize the need for individual success in business, for instance, when versus working as towards the common good as the primary goal.
Mm. Yeah, it's the thing that everyone it's like a stereotype. If you went to Harvard, you're gonna say exactly that. Say it like as quickly as possible to have like that one up on anyone.
Mhm.
So it must be weird to like accomplish that, but then also sort of want to separate from it as well. Like, don't make it. You don't want to be that person, or you don't want it to be your whole identity. Like walking around with a Harvard sweatshirt on all the time.
So there was this day towards like the year before I finished my PhD. It was 2 in the morning, and I was sitting in this like fish box of a room. The conference room in the department had like three walls of glass, and of course it was 3 in the morning. So there were 2 in the morning. So there was no one else around, and I was sitting in there on a video call or a video call or a phone call, probably a phone call at that time with my mom, and I was just in tears. And I was in tears because I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, this is just too hard. I don't know if I'm going to finish this PhD. I'm going to fail. And mom was like, that's fine. And like, just come home. I mean, she's my mom. She just doesn't want me to be crying. And so I was like, mom, like, but who am I if I fail? And she was like, well, you went to Harvard. And I'm like, no, but mom, like that is not the type of reasoning that works here, because by that reasoning, I am an objective failure because I didn't do the PhD. But who am I? Like and it comes down like, who am I if I do not succeed, if I do not do this? Like, what are other ways to define ourselves? And I think, and that's where eventually, like after trying and failing a few times, she eventually came up with the one that landed for me. You are the girl who could live in the middle of nowhere without running water for a year, notwithstanding the privilege you were raised with. And and there was like the tears stopped, and I was like, ah, yeah, okay. This is the way to define identity, right? Where identity is not the list of accomplishments, but the character, the ability, the like the in the it's in the mundane. And I think that like that was sort of my first inkling of this other way of being in the world where we can define ourselves in ways that aren't resume driven. And then I think
Mm.
that built over time.
Mm. Yeah. Um, what, where, where does your drive come from? I mean, all your accomplishments, like what's the overall thing to keep yourself motivated and keep accomplishing these things? Like, is it the stereotype, like just do the things you're passionate about, or what's the secret sauce to accomplish the things and so many things like you have?
Spiritual. It comes down to the question of what's the purpose of life, like the core question all religions try to answer. And I think for me, the answer is quite clear. I think the purpose of life is to leave the world improved. And that includes maximizing my unique abilities with whatever unique abilities I've been given. It is my responsibility to maximize my ability to use those capabilities to give back to the world and leave it improved in whatever way I can. That's my life purpose, and it's my theology, as it were, that that's everyone's life purpose, and so my coaching is helping others to do the same, and it's complicated, right? Because our abilities change, sometimes they grow, sometimes other parts shut down as we age and bodies change and whatever it might be, and then it's constant work of understanding ourselves at deeper and deeper and deeper levels to unearth abilities that might be latent in one way and to figure out like, at this stage in life and also it's multifaceted. You can't isolate one variable in your life and optimize for that. Our lives are so multifaceted. I am a daughter. I am a wife. I am, a friend. I am a sister. I am an aunt. And those responsibilities need time. I am a community member of multiple communities. What does it mean at any given time, given all of that, for me to leave the world better in the best way I can in that moment? And that's my drive.
Um, what or not what? Who ends up working with you? Um, like what? I guess what's like the overall reason they reach out and seek your assistance and coaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's the way it plays out at the surface can be different. So, like, some people are trying to find another job, others are debating whether or not to start a business of their own. Others are like, I am working too much. How do I balance work and parenting now that I am a mom or a father, a dad? Are looking towards retirement and are thinking like, okay, what does this look like? And then I have those who've been recently promoted and are like, how do I unlock this sort of potential within me, and let go of the doubt? So that all looks different. That's not really what unifies the people who draw me. I think what unifies the type of people who are uniquely interested in working with me are folks who know that it's not just a practical solution, that it's holistic and integrated and will require deep inquiry into multiple parts of their lives, and in deep into who they are as well. So all of this type of identity stuff that I'm talking about, it's identity work at its core, and identity work with the end goal of having a practical impact on their life, right? So figuring out their business or doing whatever. And I guess, like, I mean, as you said before, I've like founded and run a VC-backed startups. I've run like major, like a very, very large nonprofit. So like the practical stuff, great. There are a million coaches who also do the practical stuff, but like those who want to really go deep and address all of that from that deeper place, those are the ones who come to me.
Um, how do you know you're chasing the right thing
Mm,
in terms of? I think a lot of people are unhappy
yeah.
in their job or a relationship or both,
Mm,
and there's always the grass is greener. And I think I've suffered from this my whole life.
mm.
And I'm always chasing the thing I think will make me like, once I get this, then I'll find happiness. What, how do you know? I guess, how do you know when to stop chasing, or how do you know to keep chasing?
Mhm. If you're asking that question, and many of my clients come to me asking that question, absolutely. Like, how do I know what to do here? How do I know this? Usually the answer is, how do we learn how to read our inner knowledge and inner truth? Because you have the answer within you. You're the only one who knows. And right now, most of my clients live in the US and are like Western, even if they are born abroad, Western, broadly Western educated. And we're conditioned, myself included, for most of my life, to over index our intellectual capacities. And so we're trained out of tapping into, like, what, for instance, our body might contain in terms of truth. So it's like, how do we slow down and identify the patterns? And there's like almost like a pre-verbal language, where it's like, okay, what does your body feel like when there is truth? How do we identify that? And then how, when we ask questions, do we create the space to feel that? And then to see, what is our body telling us? And, is this, what is the response to this? Where are you feeling that response? And then how do we learn how to trust that knowledge and then interpret it into the type of knowledge or, intellectual thought that we're so well trained to work with?
Mm. I think, I definitely struggle with trusting my knowledge and my experiences, and always am second guessing my decisions.
Mhm.
I recently had a conversation with an old colleague and told him where I'm at in my life, and how once again I quit a job and started another job and quit another job, and now I'm doing this business. And he's, a very loyal, I'm going to work this job until I die and get retirement sort of situation for the county that I used to work for. And he said something to me, which it's like my brain doesn't allow it to happen on its own. I had to hear it from someone else, but he said, "Oh, you're making it work again? You always make it work." And it's that, like, simple thing sometimes from a third party. It's like, "Oh, I have done that. I've done that my whole life. It always works out." I always fear that it's not, and it does. And so I don't know, but I still don't have the trust in my instincts and my picking my next adventure. Um, is there a way to, like, build that? Is
Mhm.
there
Yeah.
exercises
Yeah.
to trust yourself more?
Yeah, and I think that for me, I don't even know that it would be about trust, but I think it would be about, well, I mean, I think that the end outcome is trust, but the process would be to learn how to read the signs in your body. So it's like to let go of the overthinking, because our brain plays games on us. So exactly what you've described is your brain going here and going there and going there. And what you're hearing, when you hear it from someone else, you're able to, like, to know, right? Like, that this is right because so the question is, how do you train that ability to know within you? And there's so many different exercises that you can do, by the way. Like, and so this is exactly what a coach would be great at, right? Like, and this is what I love doing as well, is like the fun of saying, okay, this is what I'm hearing you're saying, and like, let me put this back to you in a different way. And sometimes when we play at the intellectual level, hearing it in a different way is exactly what works, right? But that's what, like, any solid coach should be able to help you with this. I think what the question of, how do I train myself to do this? Like,
Mhm.
my business model is horrible because I want my clients to end up being self-independent and not need me over the long run, right? And so
Mhm.
that's what we're trying to work on with many of them, is like, how do we build that ability to read within you the signs, whether it's emotional, it's reading my emotions or reading my body, breeding, whatever it is that gives you that. Yeah, and for everyone it's different. So working with them to identify, like, how do you know what truth is? How do you know what feels like this is what is good for me, and what I actually want? Because the reality of life, in your example especially, is that there are many rights, and all of the rights feel wrong,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So all you can hope for is to find the right for you now, and you know that.
Yeah. It's funny that too, like with this new business idea I have, I've had so many conversations of people who once they like know a little, they hear the elevator pitch. They're like, "This is an amazing idea. I've never heard it, or I heard something similar, but like this is amazing. Keep going, keep going." And I'm like always self-destruct, but like mentally, like don't trust it, don't believe it. I think there's like a hidden agenda, and it's like, why would they just say that without being prompted? Like they don't need to feed my ego. They actually believe what they're saying, but I have such bad negative talk. I always have, and I think that's probably why I got a psychology degree, because I was trying to psychoanalyze myself out of it. But yeah, and I definitely have a lot of room to grow. But yeah, that's amazing stuff. I just thought of something super random, and this isn't really something I ask just any guest, but I would love to know what's like top 1 or 3 books that you recommend to read to like change your life or make you trust your decisions, or anything that's really like when you think of a book you have to read again, what would that be?
So it depends on what it is that you're looking for. I think that there and it depends on what stage in life you kind of are at, right?
Hmm.
So I think that if at a very, very practical level, it would be stuff around like, essentialism or what was that other one around? I have really I can't remember like specifics or names, but like there's the books are coming to my mind. The one that's let me
We can always put a link in the
yeah, I'll
description
pull
as
up my
well.
Kindle. I listen to my books. I don't read them. The Gap and the Gain or 10x is easier than 2x. Like I think Atomic Habits. I think these are all great, solid books to start with. Uh okay, so then yeah, I'm looking I mean maybe let me just tell you some of the things that I've been reading recently and then
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going for.
yeah. Okay, so those who are interested then okay, so that's like the practical stuff.
Hmm.
At the practical level of like, how do I get a quick fix to make my routines work, to make myself like more positive in my outlook and just work at that sort of like practical level. Okay. Then what I'd say is those who want to work more, a slightly at a deeper level on some of this identity stuff. The language of emotions is a good entry level way to work with emotions. I think that it's by Carla McLaren. It's really good and very easy to read. And then I highly recommend No Bad Parts. It's an introduction to family systems therapy and a really, really excellent way to do some of that type of work within yourself that you were talking about, of like how do I identify my core inner self and speak with the triggered parts that are like doubting me. But yeah, it's really awesome. So No Bad Parts, super accessible. None of these are hard to read. Um, and then if we go now into like the deeper spiritual stuff on like, like the way the world works and like these deeper things of purpose and like all of that. Um, Not an easy read, but Bernardo Kastrup's More Than Allegory is just outstanding. Just outstanding. So, like, for anyone who identifies with, like, the type of spiritual vision I'm articulating, regardless of religion, I'm an Ismaili Muslim, and so a lot of my spiritual beliefs is rooted in my faith tradition. But, like, More Than Allegory is, written by someone who's raised atheist and who does not ascribe to religion, and I resonate so much with so much of what he says. So I think, or well, almost basically everything I read it, and I'm like, yes, that's it, and so it's coming from a much more scientific perspective, but still articulating spirituality. And then I think like a lot of my integral perspectives come from Ken Wilber, so Finding Radical Wholeness. But that one is like, yeah, it's dense. So
Don't start with that one.
don't start with that one. I'd work your way up.
Maybe seek your assistance first.
Well,
In terms of first steps working with you, or if people want to find more information about working with you, should they reach out on LinkedIn
yeah.
or your website?
I'm, like, very humanly present on LinkedIn. Like, I do check my messages at the moment. I have a slight bit of a backlog, but I do respond to everyone who reaches out to me on LinkedIn. So just send me a message. It's pretty easy. You can find my website. I think there's even, like, if you go to my website, you should just be able to book a discovery call straight up. And I offer, like, free 15-minute coaching sessions. So, like, if someone has something that they don't even think they need, and it's not like I'm not gonna sell you in that 15-minute coaching conversation. So if you want, like, to work with me and pay and, like, have, like, a proper longer term working client relationship, then, like, book a 30-minute session. But if you just, like, want someone to help you, like, this is part of I actually did a post recently that I really believe in tithing my time and, like, giving back. So for as much as I'm blessed with having clients who see value in working with me in a paid capacity. I think it's really important to help those who don't currently, for whatever reason, have the financial ability or desire to pay for support.
I think that's the first one of the first posts I saw of yours somehow. And that's how I discovered you.
Yeah.
That's great that you offer the 15 minutes because I think some people want to like get a little better understanding before sort of going all in. So that's a great thing. Thanks again for your time. I feel like we did a disservice to your life story because there's so much to go into, but we don't have all day. I really appreciate your time and joining me, and I'll talk to you soon.
And if I have to say one last thing, the list of things that I've done is not definitive of who I am. And so, like, I think that I'm cool because I think I want the definition of my identity to be a list of resume accomplishments. But thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.